name's Kristen Ritzman, and today we're going to be talking about an outbreak of the Chikungunya virus. So to begin, we're just going to talk about some history of the virus. And I found most of my information for this presentation from the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene by an article that was written by Juan Rodas among some of his colleagues. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is that it was first found in Tanzania in the 1950s, and then it eventually spread to Asia, Italy, France, and the Americas. So this chart over here just shows that it started here, then it spread down, then over, and then all the way over here, probably through the Pacific Ocean to here. And that's just to show this different spread of the strains of the Chikungunya virus. And then I found an article published in the Austin Community College by Stephanie Shelton. And the article talked about like the different vectors and the different reservoirs for the virus. So the main reservoir for the Chikungunya virus are monkeys, but they also found the reservoir in the squirrels and other small rodents. And then the main vector for the virus is also mosquitoes, and there can be different species of mosquitoes that spread the virus. And then they also found that tourism also spreads the virus, and that was by what Mackenzie talked about when an infected person gets bit by a healthy mosquito. The virus then goes backwards back into the mosquito, and they can spread it among other healthy individuals in an area. So the next thing we're going to talk about is just some of the science behind Chikungunya. And in order to be able to understand the full virulence of it and the full why it is so widespread, we have to understand the makeup of a virus. So all viruses are either have DNA or RNA in them, and this particular virus has RNA, which makes it even more virulent. So the DNA or RNA is the strand in the middle. This outside piece over here is the capsid, and then the yellow is the envelope. Now the envelope is the most important thing that I'm going to be talking about, and that's because the envelope houses these green spikes right here called glycoprotein spikes, and these help with viral entry into the cell, as well as it can either help with viral entry into the cell to make it more pathogenic, or it can also serve our immune system as like a flag as, hey, I'm not self, come kill me, so it can either help or hurt us. And then the other thing about these spikes that's really important is the fact that they can actually mutate or change their appearance, which then allows them to evade our immune system so our immune system doesn't detect them. So the next thing we're going to talk about is why these glycoprotein spikes are so important in Chikungunya. So there's actually 3 different strains of Chikungunya, or lineages. The first one is the West African, which is the original lineage. The second is the East Central South African lineage, and the third is the Asian lineage. So there's the African one, or the West African. There's the ECSA, and then there's the Asian lineage. So this Asian lineage actually moved into the Indian Ocean and created a really pathogenic new lineage called the IOL, or the Indian Ocean lineage. And all these different strains actually have different glycoprotein makeups, which help it be transmitted by different mosquitoes, or and help or hurt in the virulence. So like I said, the IOL is the most virulent, so it has the most virulent spike makeup. So now we're just going to talk about the outbreak that I chose, which is Colombia. So I found a lot of this information also from Sheldon and Rodas, and the outbreak occurred between 2014 and 2015. And the first case was, or the quote-unquote first case was discovered between June and August of 2013. And I say quote-unquote because it was really hard to pinpoint the actual first case, because like Mackenzie said, it was masked by dengue fever because they do have very similar symptoms. And Colombia is also a very susceptible area for Chikungunya because it's such a wet area, because it's right by the Amazon rainforest, and wet areas are a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. And then also there's a ton of tourism to Colombia just because of the area and how beautiful the country is. So we already talked about how tourism spreads Chikungunya. And then also the severity of the virus depends on your age. So Chikungunya doesn't really pick and choose who it infects. It can infect everyone. But the youngest people and the oldest people, so young neonates or young infants, and then the elderly are most susceptible to the worst virus cases. And then also there was over 100,000 suspected cases just in 2014. And there's not really a concrete number of cases in Colombia, and that's partially due to the masking of dengue fever, and partially due to an article that I found for Doctors Without Borders website. It talked about a village called Nariño, a small village in Colombia called Nariño, and they interviewed a lot of the inhabitants there, and they said that they don't really trust their healthcare system, or they can't afford the healthcare system, so they're not able to go and get diagnosed, so they can't really pinpoint the exact number of cases in the outbreak. So Now we're just going to talk about some what lineage the virus was in Colombia. And the Rodas article found that it was the Asian lineage that moved over to Colombia. So it moved over from the Pacific into the Americas. And a good thing about this is the fact that there was only 73 related deaths to the chikungunya virus, and 7 of them were related to co-infection with dengue. Mackenzie already talked about how dengue seems to be a little bit more deadly than chikungunya. So this was actually a very low death rate compared to other outbreaks of chikungunya, and this does have to do with the different glycoprotein spikes. So like I already talked about, the IOL strain tends to be the most pathogenic, and that's because there is a mutation in the E1 glycoprotein. So this protein right here mutates and makes itself look different, and that causes it to be extremely pathogenic. And in the Asian lineage, when it interacts with the IOL, it doesn't allow this same mutation to happen in the Asian lineage, so that causes its pathogenicity to be severely decreased as compared to the IOL. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is if the virus is still occurring in Colombia, which it is not. The CDC doesn't have any health travel notices for Colombia, which means there's no significant outbreaks that are going to hurt travelers there. The only thing they really do talk about is malaria, which that's up all the time because malaria is such a prominent thing in Colombia. And those are just preventative measures that you should take before you travel there, like vaccines or stuff like that. So in conclusion, we discussed how Colombia is the perfect spot for chikungunya to take place because it's so wet and because there's so much tourism there. However, the outbreak in Colombia was not the most deadly because it doesn't have the E1 mutation. And we also talked about how chikungunya is extremely hard to distinguish from dengue because of the similar symptoms. And we also discussed how it's very hard to pinpoint how many exact cases there are of chikungunya in Colombia because of the mistrust and the lack of health care as well as the similar symptoms. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you learned something. Have a great day.